accident in history. But let's talk about the solid radioactive waste that's lying on the ground, not just in the power plant, but in the entire state of Fukushima, as well as all the other surrounding prefectures. It's been estimated that to clean up the waste in Fukushima prefecture alone would fill at least 33 stadiums the size of the New Orleans Superdome. Now, this is an enormous problem. And how are the Japanese planning to handle the problem of what do we do with all this nuclear waste? Well, I thought I'd use one example to talk about the approach that the Japanese are using. On December 14th of this year, a school near Tokyo found a tarp that was loaded with radiation, over 90,000 disintegrations per second per kilogram of the tarp. Now, the tarp had been laid on a field in March and April and had been removed and was rolled up and laying next to the building for several months. Now, the solution, what are we going to do with this radioactive tarp, really speaks to what's happening throughout Japan right now. And I thought I'd read to you what the Japanese are proposing. The Environment Ministry said on December 12th, quote, "The level of radioactive cesium can be adequately diluted by mixing 1 ton of other material for every kilogram of the contaminated covers before they are incinerated." Now, what they said was that they will dilute it 1,000 to 1 with clean material and then burn that. So the solution in Japan right now is different than everywhere else in the world. That cover, had it been discovered in the United States, would be buried in an underground waste dump, perhaps in Texas, and would be out of harm's way for 300 years. The Japanese are proposing incinerating the radioactive waste instead. Now that poses 2 problems. Some of the radioactivity goes up the stack, and some of the radioactivity remains in the ash that then has to be disposed of. What are the Japanese planning to do with the ash? Well, in this case, that ash is going to be spread in Tokyo Bay. That's right, the incinerator waste, which in any other country in the world would be classified as radioactive waste and have to be disposed of in a regulated waste depository. That waste is being dumped into landfills in Tokyo Bay. Now, is it a good idea to dump nuclear waste into Tokyo Bay? Is it even legal to dump nuclear waste into Tokyo Bay? There's a convention called the London Dumping Convention. It's been shortened to the London Convention. That Greenpeace was responsible for pushing through international organizations over 30 years ago. That convention, the London Dumping Convention, prohibits a country from taking nuclear waste and dumping it in the ocean. Back then, when Greenpeace pushed for this convention, countries were taking their nuclear waste in freighters, dragging it out into the ocean and dumping it at sea. Well, this is a little bit different. Had the Japanese taken this ash and put it on a freighter and taken it out into the Pacific, it would be a violation of the London Dumping Convention. But they're not. They're putting it in a dump truck and they're pouring it into Tokyo Bay. That may not be a legal violation of the London Dumping Convention, but I submit to you, it really violates the intent of that convention. I hope that over the next year, organizations like Greenpeace will look at this waste problem. It's not just occurring in Tokyo, but in other incinerators throughout the Japanese islands that are releasing contaminated water that is heading directly into the Pacific Ocean. Now, this process of dumping nuclear waste into Tokyo Bay and other locations has also been condoned by the International Atomic Energy Agency. The final question then is, who is monitoring all of these issues? The personnel exposures, the people in Japan, the dumping of waste into the Pacific Ocean. The answer is that TEPCO is being monitored by the International Atomic Energy Agency. And also, the International Atomic Energy Agency is determining what's an acceptable level of risk. The 2,000 millirem number has been condoned by the IAEA. Now, who's monitoring the ocean? 27 nations have formed a contract with the IAEA to monitor the ocean off of Fukushima. And lastly, who's head of the IAEA? The current head of the IAEA was a regulator for the Japanese government before he assumed the job. Now, I thought I'd share with you just one sentence from the IAEA Charter, and you can go up online and confirm this. Article 2 of the Charter for the IAEA says, quote, "The agencies shall seek to accelerate and enlarge the contribution of atomic energy to peace, health, and prosperity throughout the world." So the person that you and I are expecting to be the regulator, in fact, has for his charter that they will promote nuclear power instead. You'll read in published reports that this is a UN watchdog agency. In fact, that's not true. It's an organization established by nations around the world to promote atomic power, not to regulate it. And I submit to you that the root cause of this problem is that we as citizens have to take control over agencies like the IAEA in the next year. We really can't wait longer than that because Fukushima is going to be releasing radioactivity to the water, and the Japanese government are going to be dumping into Tokyo Bay for many years. This is the time to stop it. You recall that famous saying, follow the money? I think what's happening here is just that. We all need to follow the money. The Japanese government has made a trade-off. They've decided that they don't want to risk Tokyo Electric's financial viability. They don't want its financial exposure to be jeopardized. So the trade-off that the Japanese government has made has been to risk the radiation exposure of its people rather than risk the exposure of Tokyo Electric to bankruptcy. I don't think that's a fair trade-off. And I hope that all of us around the world, not just the Japanese, as citizens begin to use the internet and force our international agencies to do what's right. Not for Tokyo Electric, but for the people of Japan. Finally, Fairewinds Energy Education Corp is an IRS 501c3 tax-deductible corporation. I'd like to thank the thousands of people who have contributed already to the success of these 50 videos that we've put up since Fukushima. And I'd like to encourage you, if you haven't, to contribute before the end of the year. Most importantly, I'd also like to thank the many, many volunteers, volunteer transcriptionists, volunteer translators, computer programmers, scientists, and people who have sent raw data for us to analyze. It's your contributions, both financial and with your personal efforts, that have made this site a success in 2011. Happy New Year.